Today's guests like to travel the world. They'll be sharing with us a recent trip to Antarctica and to South Georgia Island, made famous by the great explorer Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton. They've much to tell and breathtaking videos to share. Please stay tuned.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program that encompasses a diverse spectrum of topics important to our community, which we hope will both inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the program.
Have you ever thought of visiting the Antarctic? It's not the usual place for a vacation, but you might want to consider it. It has a history and a beauty all of its own. It's home to thousands of penguins who stand side by side. It has picturesque icebergs in interesting shapes with schools of killer whales swimming nearby, snow-covered mountains, and miles of icy terrain. Our guests, Jerry and Jenny Kaminsky, have been to the resting place of Antarctic explorer Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton. They're here to tell us some history and what they saw in the South Polar regions. I'm Val Jeffrey of The Better Part. Welcome, Jerry and Jenny.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jerry, what's the best time of year to go to the Antarctic?
Well, the best time is our winter because it's in the southern hemisphere. In our summer, it's really cold and freezing and dark down there. So we're able to go into that area, say, in November to January.
Okay, so when you flew to Santiago, Chile, is that right?
Flew to Santiago and then on to Ushuaia. And at Ushuaia, we got on a ship and crossed Drake's Passage to continue on to Antarctica.
Right.
That's the southern tip of Argentina.
So when you're on the big boat, then how do you get to the islands? On Zodiacs,
We
is
use
that right?
Zodiacs. They're rubber boats that hold up to 12 people with a pretty powerful motor. And we do a lot of touring, sightseeing, and go from landings to boats and back and forth.
Do you have to get out in the water when you do that?
Sometimes, yes. That's where our big rubber boots come in handy to step into the freezing water.
Why did you want to go to Antarctica? It's not a usual place.
Well, it's really something different. It's, I think what I've seen are photos of all of the penguins and thought, gee, we could really enjoy seeing so many birds.
Why did Shackleton want to go to the Antarctic, I wonder?
Well, he was an explorer, and I guess they want to go to places where nobody's been before. And originally, he wanted to go to the South Pole, but that had been done ahead of this. So his object was to cross the Antarctic continent, go from one side to the other, and do something nobody had done.
All right, well, let's tell our viewers a little bit about Shackleton. Shackleton was born in Ireland in 1872, and he's famous for his many expeditions attempting to reach the South Pole. His first attempt was with the Antarctic Discovery Expedition in 1901 to 1904, led by another explorer, Robert Falcon Scott, but he was sent home on health grounds. Shackleton perceived this as a personal failure, so in 1907 he led the British Nimrod expedition, during which Mount Erebus was ascended, the South Magnetic Pole was located, and the Victoria Land Plateau was claimed for Britain. The expedition got within 97 miles of the South Pole, and the scientific results of the expedition were of vast importance. So upon his return to England in 1909, Shackleton was knighted by King Edward VII. Shackleton's next expedition was in 1914 to 1916. The plan was to enter the Weddell Sea and cross the South Polar region to the Ross Sea on foot, a distance of 2,000 miles. But his ship, Endurance, got sunk in ice and was crushed by pack ice. So in October 1915, the ship was abandoned and eventually sank. Shackleton led his party 180 miles to safety on Elephant Island. In need of help for his crew, he and 5 companions made a voyage of 800 miles through raging seas to South Georgia Island, only to land on the island's south side in May of 1916. The group had to trek to the whaling station on the north side over rugged, icy landscape. Shackleton rescued the 22 members of his crew from Elephant Island in August of 1916. It was the 4th attempt, as the 3 previous attempts had failed due to the treacherous ice conditions. After the rescue, the Chilean boat, the Elco, proceeded to Punta Arenas in southern Chile and on to Santiago before finally getting the crew back home safely to England. In 1921, Shackleton set sail on another voyage, which he did not complete. Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton died at sea in 1922 and is buried on South Georgia Island. Now, you visited Shackleton's resting place on South Georgia Island. Describe his grave.
Well, it was pretty neat. That's on Gerviken, and it's a small cemetery, but there are other people there. He had quite a large headstone. And what was kind of interesting, there were some Norwegian sailors there picking dandelions. When they're out on sea, they have no greens, and so they were picking the dandelion greens to eat. And the dandelions got there from the burying of the Norwegian sailors. People from Norway would bring a handful of soil to put on the grave, and that's how the dandelions got started down there.
Wow. I remember as a kid we used to blow the seed pods everywhere. So I suppose that they grow fairly easily anywhere.
Yes, they do.
And that's the way they got their nutrition.
Yes.
Huh. You were telling me about a tradition at the grave.
Oh, we would all stand around the grave and they would give us a cup of rum, a little paper cup of rum, and we would toast the boss. Shackleton was known as the boss. And then we would take part of the rum and then put it on his grave. Say, one for the boss.
Very fragrant grave.
Really?
Yes, yes. All the rum that was poured on it.
Aha. Okay.
It was a lot of fun. It was a very moving ceremony, too. They read the inscription on his headstone and talked about his life. It was very impressive.
He had a problem getting to the whaling station. Did you take the same route as him? How did you get to the whaling station?
Well, there were a number of people on our trip that were following his footsteps. We met them at Fortuna Bay, is where Shackleton came into. He thought he was at Stromness, but he actually ended up in Fortuna Bay, so we had to go up and over the hill and down the other side to the factory. We went up the hill, got down the other side, and looked down, and there's this really big snow field, big chute to go down, and started to walk down and thought, this is a little bit scary. But everybody said, sit down and slide, so we sat down and we slid down on our bottom all the way down, and it was just a blast. Shackleton, I guess, had to go down a frozen waterfalls off to our right, which we didn't see, but
you had more fun snowboarding.
We had a lot more fun going down, and it's really impressive standing up there looking down at the whaling station and thinking of all that Shackleton had been through. It was a very inspirational moment. Stromness is where he went to when he first got on land and went over to get help at the whaling station. He went to the manager's house. That was on Stromness. That's where the whaling station is. Where he's buried in the museum is at Gerviken. It's another port, not too far away.
It's about 15 miles.
Was the factory how you imagined it?
Well, I really hadn't imagined what a factory could look like, but I'm really interested in looking at all of the old machinery laying there. And the most impressive thing was to see the manager's house where Shackleton finally got help.
Everything is really run down, rusty, but the house is still white. And you can just imagine Shackleton going to the manager's house and knocking at the door, and they looked so bad after being traveling for so many years, couple years. And the shock of the manager when he opened the front door and when he first was told that it was Shackleton, he just turned away and wept, they said. So that really was very impressive.
Now, South Georgia Island's quite big, actually. You made quite a few stops there, didn't you?
We made 20 stops.
20 stops.
Yes.
And did you see lots of penguins there? Is that where you first saw your
Oh.
penguins?
Lots and lots and lots of penguins. There are, the one spot that we stopped had just hundreds and thousands of king penguins on it, which are almost as big as the emperor, not quite. And then there were Adelies and Gentoo and chinstraps, and then on some of the other islands we saw different types of penguins. The Falklands, we saw the Magellanic and the rockhoppers. And another part of South Georgia, we saw the macaroni penguins.
What about the emperor penguins, like in the March of the Penguins?
We saw one floating on an iceberg, and that was very unusual to see that. They're more over in the Ross Ice Shelf side, the other side of where we were.
Oh, I see.
So we were lucky to see one.
What about the Falklands? That's in
The
that area?
Falklands are up in the other end. They're past South Georgia. And we went to Port Stanley, which is one of the main harbors there. But from there we went over and saw the rockhopper penguins, and that's where the colony of the nesting black-browed albatross do. I think that's the largest population in the world. And it was so much fun to see the two types of animals interacting with each other, and the mating ritual of the black-browed albatross doing their beak fencing, how they look like they're fencing with each other with their beak, and the noise that they make, the courting ritual noise, and it was much fun to be in the midst of all of that.
And then they had the rockhopper penguins there. And there'd be the sheer cliff from where they have their nests down to the ocean. I mean, it must be 50, 100 feet high. It looks like you could never climb it or anything, and the little penguins are going up and down. It's amazing. That's no wonder they call them rockhoppers.
Yeah. And they have a different kind of nest. They nest within the tussock grass, where some of the other penguins nest right on the open on the snow, or preferably the rocks. That's, I think, where they really prefer. And on South Georgia, some of them were close enough to vegetation where the male could bring over a little bit of vegetation to put in around the nest. It's very sweet to see. And the others would pick up a rock and take over to the mate and like, is this okay, honey? Can I put this rock here? They're really cute.
And they steal the rocks, too.
Oh, yes, they steal the rocks.
The one penguin will have a little rock nest built up, and another one will come over and sneak around and take a rock and run away with it to put it on his nest.
Little stinkers.
Yeah.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
They're quite territorial. The best nesting area is up on the top because that's where the snow melts first, and their whole breeding time is very limited. So they want to get up there on top and lay their eggs and get their nesting process going. But on the other hand, they have to go down through the whole colony of penguins, and everybody's picking and you know, like, don't come into my territory. And so they have to go run that gamut every time they come up from the ocean, and it's comical.
What other animals did you see?
Porpoises, whales, quite a few, I would say maybe a half a dozen different variety of whales. Several different varieties of albatross, lots of birds, skua birds, petros, blue-eyed shags, and all kinds of fun birds.
And elephant seals.
Oh gosh, the elephant
They're
seals.
so big.
Huge.
And, yeah, they just curious to watch them. And they had the babies there, and you could just walk up to the babies and look at them.
The big elephants, males weigh about 3 tons, so they're just a huge amount of blubber on the beach guarding their harems. And it was really fun because, again, they have no fear of us at all. So,
Do they swim around the boat at all?
no.
No. What about the killer whales? Do they swim around the boat?
Yes, they do.
They
Yes.
do? Do you have a
Yes.
story about one? It
Yes.
looks like you do.
Yes. It was kind of late at night. I think it must have been about 11 o'clock, but it was still light enough to where we could see. And they spotted a pod of killer whales out at sea. And we were watching them, and they were really frolicking around, playing, looked like they were having a really good time. There must have been a lot of krill there for them to eat. And all of a sudden they started to spy hop. They put their nose up out of the water. And one spy hopped, and then a number of them spy hopped, and they came right over to the bow of the boat. So they were right next to the boat. We got a really good look at them. That was such a treat.
Oh, that was so exciting.
Yes, it was.
Penguins are beautiful, but they're also food.
Yes.
I think you have a gory tale to tell us.
Or the leopard seals, they'll go after the penguins. And they bite them, and then they shake them and kind of turn them inside out, and then they eat their insides. And then we'll find this kind of pelt of a penguin floating in the
Just
water.
floating around, and we couldn't figure out why that was there. And then they told us how they shake them so hard that they turn them inside out. So.
Well, I'm glad I asked the question, but I wish I hadn't.
The other birds are the garbage collectors, so they keep things clean. They eat all those leftovers, and so you don't see a lot of gross stuff on the beaches because it's already taken care of. There's food for everybody.
What other islands did you go to?
I think one of the really interesting ones we went to was Deception Island, and that's volcanic. There was an eruption there not that long ago, and so there's geothermal water. The crew dug some holes in the gravel, and the hot water came up, and I got my feet in it. I had my bathing suit on. I was going to go in, but it was cold and windy, and there wasn't enough room to get my body down in the warm water, so I only put my feet in it. But that was
What about you, Jerry?
Oh.
Did you put your feet into
I
it?
was doing the video camera, so I didn't get in the water.
Any excuse, right?
Well,
Yeah.
it was raining, and it was foggy
Windy
and
and-
cold and snowing, and trying to keep the camera under my jacket so it didn't get wet.
That was the only island where they had a runway there too, so they were able to get some small planes in there. And there is a wreckage, not a wreckage, but kind of a rundown small plane that's sitting alongside.
How do they handle the different islands that you stop at? In the Galapagos, some of the islands you have to keep to a certain path and you can't touch the animals. And how does it work in Antarctica? Can you touch them?
Well, no, you're not allowed to touch the animals.
Okay.
But the Galapagos, we felt so confined to have to stay on the path with the guide. In the Antarctic, they would take us to the beach, and we would get out of the Zodiac, walk ashore through the water, and then we were on our own. And they say, okay, we'll pick you up at such and such a time, and we could wander where we wanted. And We weren't allowed to touch the animals, but if we would just sit there, they would come over and touch us. The little penguins, the little king penguins, they call them oakum boys, they'd come over and peck on our boots and look at us.
Very, very curious, very fun, and they have no fear whatsoever. They'll just come right over to us and look at us and look right into the camera and peck at our boots, and so we didn't touch them, but they did touch us.
There must be so much beautiful scenery to see.
Oh.
The icebergs floating by. Were you a bit nervous floating around the icebergs there, or?
When we were in kayaks, we were very close to the icebergs, but we had our life vest on plus a monitor. You tell them about the monitor that we had on.
Yeah, so supposing you did happen to fall in the water, I mean, they've just got you a certain amount of time to get you out, so cold.
We wouldn't have much time to live in the water. I mean, we had this little monitor around our neck, and if we were to spill and it were to get wet in the salt water, it would send out a signal, and they had people in Zodiacs driving around with a monitor, and so they would know to come and get us. Now, we were in kayaks, we're a two-person kayak, so we each had a monitor, and sometimes a person will want to take a kayak just by themselves. So they make that person wear two of the monitors. So when they go to do the rescue, they would know there was only one person and they wouldn't have to spend time looking for somebody missing. Luckily, we didn't get our things wet. We didn't get wet in the water.
But we did go around the icebergs, some little ones. I don't think we went around any huge icebergs because they do have a tendency to flip. And you don't want to be there when that happens.
Certainly not.
That's dangerous.
Was it always cold and windy? I noticed the jacket that you brought in looks very substantial to keep you warm.
Yes.
Tell me about the weather.
It's always windy because it's at the bottom of the world and there's no place to stop the wind. It just goes around the whole bottom of the world there. So it is always windy. For being cold, it wasn't terribly cold. I think one day it got up to 45 degrees.
What was your favorite island or favorite place?
I think South Georgia, because we made so many stops there, 20 different places, and all of the penguins. It was just amazing to go to a beach and find like hundreds of thousands of these king penguins. And all the noise, they are very noisy. And the parents will go out in the water to get fish to bring back to feed their chick, and they come back to this beach with all those penguins, and somehow they find their chick. They won't feed any others but just theirs, and they say they find them by the noise they make, but it's so noisy, I don't know how they ever do that.
Yeah, it's very noisy. All the chicks have their little, much different call, and then the parents have a totally different call, and when they call, much of the time they will sky point. They will put their beak straight up in the air and give this special call. So, and it's quite loud. And I'm not sure if that's a signal for something, but it seems like I noticed when they were doing that, like the whole family unit was there. Maybe they were happy. Maybe they were putting out this good call. I don't know. But there was a lot of noise. It was almost deafening. I mean, it just was, when you got 100,000, hundreds of thousands big penguins there making their noise. And they make a lot of noise. They stand there sometimes belly to belly and they just look at each other, just stare at each other, and you wonder, what are they thinking?
So Shackleton would have seen lots of penguins as well.
Yes, and then they do their little flipper fights too. They chase each other around and hit each other with their flippers. So a lot of antics, very fun to watch.
Yeah. Well, we're coming towards the end of the show, and I think I'd like to go back to Shackleton and finish with a quotation. And the quotation is by Sir Raymond Priestley. He was a British geologist and Antarctic explorer. For scientific leadership, forgive me, Scott, for swift and efficient travel, Amundsen. But when you're in a hopeless situation, when there seems to be no way out, get on your knees and pray for Shackleton.
Amen.
I love that quotation. Would you go back again? Would you encourage others to go back?
Absolutely, yes. It's a beautiful, unique, just wonderful. I mean, snow-capped mountains up to almost 10,000 feet, and icebergs of different sizes and shapes and colors, and penguins galore, and it's just an unspoiled beauty.
It's an amazing place.
Just
Yeah. Ginny, you always do something very nice on all your trips, and I wonder if you could tell our viewers what it is and tell me about this.
We always do a fundraiser for the areas that we're in, and this time we did a fundraiser for the museum on Graviken, and they had a silent auction on many different items, and this was the stamps, the first day stamps of South Georgia, and it's signed by all of the staff on the boat, and wonderful souvenir. We were lucky enough to get this one, and it's a real treasure for me. Also on the island, I got my little pin here, my penguins, at the museum on Graviken. So it was just a little museum, but I don't think they get very much business, and it was nice to be able to support them this way.
Well, thank you so much for coming and for sharing your videos and your photos. And I wish you happy travels wherever you go next.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you would like a copy of this program or any of the Better Part programs, please contact us at the Cupertino Senior Center, 408-777-3150, or visit our website, www.thebetterpart.com. A selection of our programs are also available through the Santa Clara County Library System and on YouTube. I'm Val Jeffrey for The Better Part, and I thank you for watching.